Let's talk about the recent vulnerability in Apache Tomcat that allows RCE. Some of us know that Apache Tomcat is an open source web server and servlet container developed by the Apache software. So it is primarily used to deploy and serve Java-based web applications. But because of some certain configuration and how Java application was handling the user input, it could lead to RCE. So we will jump into that slowly, but first we have to understand something. In Java, you must have heard about, or any other language in general, you must have heard about serialization and deserialization. And if you haven't, then keep watching, because I'm going to give you a simple example to understand this. I created some notes for you guys, so let's understand what is serialization. This is the process of converting an object or data structure into a format that can be easily transmitted over a network or stored. So the common formats for this are JSON, XML, or protocol buffers. This is usually used in gRPC, but that's a different concept. I think most of you are aware of JSON and XML more. So in this example, we can see a Python object gets serialized into JSON string to be sent via an API. So we know the JSON structure, which is similar to this. Now we have an object here, and inside the object we have two properties, name and age. Now we want to serialize this object. So we are using a particular method from the JSON class, and its name is stringify, which takes user, which is the name of the object, and it serializes the object. So this is a live object in the memory, and now this method has made this object and string, and this looks like this. Now let's talk about deserialization. This is the reverse process, converting serialized data like JSON string back to a usable object. This is the result. Now you must be thinking the serialized string and the deserialized string both look similar, but there is a difference. It looks similar because we are using JSON, but if you talk about serialization and deserialization in core level, for example, in Java, you convert an object into a byte stream. So when you serialize it, it converts into a byte stream. And if you open that file, you won't be able to read anything. It's like byte format, everything written, random stuff. So it's not readable, but you can store it and then transfer it over a network, whatever you want to do with it. That's the actual reason why we serialize data. And when you deserialize it, it converts back into the readable object. So byte stream to back to a readable or usable object in programming language. If it's totally not making sense for you, then probably because you don't know these concepts in programming. You have to start learning programming first, because this is not a programming video and I give you the context. So learn about those things first and then come back here. Now this example I showed you, I took the example of JSON because it is really simple to understand. To understand in context of Java, I want to show you this. So first it opens the file wherever it contains the object, and then it converts it into byte stream, basically in binary format. And we know that binary format is not readable, but the purpose of it is to store it, save the state of the object, or send it over a network as I have written here. And then once it is converted using the write object method, you're gonna just close this file. Now this is a process of serialization in Java. Now when you're going to deserialize it, you're going to open the file and then you're going to read it and convert it back to its object, and then you can close it. Again, you can add some statements here to print the contents from the file as well. Okay guys, so I have this online Java compiler to show you an example. I'm going to paste the code, and this is going to take an object which is this user object, and it will take name and age. So we have provided the name Alice and age 30 over here. After assigning this value, we are converting it to serialized object first, closing the file. And in this case, we are serializing it in base64 format. So you can serialize it in different format if you want. Now here we are deserializing the object back to its real format. So let's run this. Okay, here we have the serialize, which is base 64. You can use some other format like binary, similar to the example I showed you before. And this is the deserialized format. Okay, so now you have a visual view of it. Hope this makes sense. So now we can look at this diagram and understand what is going on here. First, we have the client here, which sends an object in JSON format. So it is serialized right now. The server receives the object and then do the process of deserialization and do some processes in it or whatever they have provided in the code, like what to do with that data. And when it is done, they serialize the object again in JSON format and send it back to the client. Now let's understand the exploitation. So what happens is there are some particular conditions, but we will look at those conditions first, understand the basics. So what happens is Tomcat O logic replaces the slashes with the dots when processing file names. So when you upload something and it gets uploaded in a format like /uploads /sessions /malicious.session, and it becomes something like uploads.sessions.malicious.session. So here you can see slashes are replaced with dots. This flawed mapping bypass security checks and lets attacker target sensitive directories like the session storage folder. Now this can only happen if there is a particular HTTP method that is allowed, which is the put HTTP method. So attacker uploads it using HTTP put request to a forced path that points to the session store. And then attacker generates a serialized object that triggers RCE. So the conditions for it to work are 4 conditions. First is write enable default servlet. So the read-only parameter in the conf/web.xml must set to false and enable put request default is true. So by default this is set to true, but somehow the developer changes to false, then there's a high risk of this vulnerability, even if there's a partial put support, which is enabled by default, allowing attackers to manipulate file uploads. And the third is file-based session persistence. Tomcat must use file-based session storage null default at its default location. This means that the files are stored in the disk instead of a database, which is the default location as we know. And the fourth is deserialization libraries. The application must include a library vulnerable to deserialization attacks, such as older versions of Apache Commons collection, that will deserialize the attacker's payload that is in a serialized format and then saves it in the disk and then executes it. Even without RCE, the flaw permits information disclosure, example, accessing sensitive configuration files or data corruption, for example, injecting malicious content into uploaded files. So let me show you how the web.xml file looks like. It looks something like this. And here you can see we have this read-only parameter and it is set to false. If it's set to false, means it allows write operations and is highly vulnerable to this attack. So the simple fix here would be just to change it to true. And if you go back to the blog, we can see here some steps of how the exploit works. So I'll provide the link in the description. So this is the Python code to illustrate the example. Generate a malicious serialized payload, upload the payload via HTTP put, and then trigger deserialization. For that, we have here is this. So here it is using the tool YSO serial, and then it takes the serialized payload with the .ser extension, and then it uploads it on the target server in this path. So this slashes converts into dots as I showed you before. And this is uploaded via the put HTTP method. Then it will show payload upload failed with a status code. And if the response code is either of these, but if the payload did got triggered, and if you access this particular index.jsp path, and if you get the response code 500, then means the exploit likely succeeded. So there is a POC of this as well, which is this one. I'll provide the link in the description of this as well. If I scroll down, you can see again we have some exploitation steps, and this is how the tool works. You just have to provide the target URL and provide some options. So first it is checking if put is enabled or not, and then it takes the session ID, then it try to upload the payload, and it tries to access that path as we saw earlier based on the server response code, which is 500 after deserialization. It says if the target is vulnerable to this. Okay, now look at some mitigation steps. So first obviously is to upgrade Apache Tomcat to this provided versions and disable the write permissions. So set the read only to true in the web.xml file, and then disable the partial put support as well. Okay guys, this was an interesting bug and I liked covering it. So one of my subscribers actually recommended this topic to me in my Discord server. So if you also have any more topics, you can write it there or in the comment section and I'll try to make videos on that. Hope you enjoyed watching this video and I'll see you in the next one.